Why was her rifle trembling in her hands? The night was calm, too calm. The desert air carried only the faint hum of a generator somewhere behind the compound, the metallic groan of loose sheet metal swaying with the wind. Yet her breathing betrayed her, shallow, sharp. Her finger hovered inches from the trigger, but her chest felt heavy, like someone had laid a mountain of silence upon her. She could see the shape of the target through her scope, a faint figure lit by a lantern's glow. He wasn't moving, not yet. And still her rifle trembled. No one around her knew why. She adjusted her cheek weld against the stock, trying to steady the sight. The world narrowed into a single corridor of vision, crosshairs framing a life she might take. The radios in her ear buzzed with static, muffled whispers. Her spotter was breathing heavily too, not from nerves, but from the run-up here. He had no idea what was happening inside her chest. She pressed her lips together, tasting the metallic tang of dry blood where she had bitten them earlier. She thought of her father for a moment, a memory that shouldn't have surfaced now. His voice, low and calm, telling her as a child how steady hands come from steady hearts. But her heart was anything but steady tonight. The commander's voice crackled in her ear. "Confirm visual. Do you have the shot?" Her throat tightened. "Yes," she whispered, but it wasn't true, not entirely. Because she hadn't told them something, not yet. She shifted her grip slightly, careful not to make a sound that would carry across the rooftop. The compound below lay in fragments of shadow and dim light, the walls scarred with age, patched with tin, and stained with years of dust storms. Somewhere a dog barked, then went silent, as though it too was waiting for her to decide. Why tonight of all nights did her body betray her? She had pulled this trigger before, too many times to count. Each mission etched another line into her memory, but tonight was different. Tonight, her rifle trembled. Her spotter leaned closer, whispering without breaking his own focus. "Steady, just breathe. You've done this 100 times." She almost wanted to laugh. Yes, 100 times, maybe more. But did he know what each of those times had taken from her? Did he know what ghosts she carried on her shoulders each night when she closed her eyes? She let the scope drift for just a second, catching sight of the horizon, faint stars glimmering above the desert. The kind of stars you only see when the world is far from cities, far from noise. She remembered watching stars with her younger brother when they were children, lying on the hood of their father's truck. He would point at constellations and invent names that weren't real. And she would let him believe them because who was she to crush wonder? Her chest tightened again. Her brother. She hadn't spoken his name aloud in years. Not since the day he vanished into a war of his own making, a war she never dared to question. The commander's voice snapped her back. "Confirm, do you have the shot?" Her finger brushed the trigger. The metal felt colder than the night. She blinked hard, trying to clear the fog in her vision. And then something happened, something no one else saw. The target, illuminated faintly below, stepped into the light fully. For a brief second his face was clear, weathered, tired. Not the monster she expected, not the faceless figure the briefing had painted. He looked human. She froze. Her spotter leaned in again, sharper now. "Take the shot." But she couldn't. Not yet. Her rifle trembled harder, the barrel quivering like a reed in the wind. Every muscle in her body screamed against the order. Because there was something else, something only she knew. This man, her target, was connected to her. She couldn't explain it. Not here, not now. But in the lines of his face, the curve of his jaw, the tired heaviness in his shoulders, she saw something that belonged to another life. A memory, a shadow. And in that moment, her silence became louder than the static in her headset. The commander's voice rose. "What's the delay? Confirm." Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she lowered the rifle, just slightly, barely an inch, but enough. Her spotter stiffened beside her. "What the hell are you doing?" She didn't answer, she couldn't. The night pressed in around them. The air grew thicker, heavier, as though the desert itself held its breath. Somewhere in the distance, a mortar boomed, faint but real, a reminder that the war did not wait for hesitation. Her spotter cursed under his breath. "We're not here to think, we're here to finish the job." She almost wanted to scream back at him. Was that all it was? A job? Was she nothing more than a finger on a trigger? Her mind spiraled. Images flickered: training yards, cold mornings, silent barracks. Nights when she pretended she was stone, when in truth she was crumbling. She steadied the rifle again, forcing herself to breathe, but her chest still ached with the weight of choice. Because this night was not like the others. This night would not vanish into routine. This night would be remembered. Her finger brushed the trigger once more, and in that fragile moment between action and restraint, she realized something. Whatever choice she made, it would define her. It would not only shape her mission, but echo through the people who followed her story, whether they knew her name or not. She closed her eyes just for a second, felt the rifle tremble against her palms, felt the pounding rhythm of her heart echo in her ears. And then, the lantern below went out. The compound fell into darkness. Her spotter swore again, whisper shouting into his mic, "Target's moving, we've lost him." She opened her eyes, but the figure was gone. Vanished. The night swallowed everything. She exhaled, long and slow, almost collapsing against the rifle as if it had been holding her upright all along. The commander's voice cut through the static again, cold and clipped. "Report, what happened?" Her lips trembled. She wanted to say the truth, that her rifle trembled because her heart trembled, that she wasn't sure anymore who she was serving, the mission or herself. But she didn't, not yet. Instead, she whispered, "Target obscured, awaiting new orders." The silence that followed felt heavier than the desert sky. Her spotter shook his head, muttering something she couldn't hear. But deep down she knew. This was only the beginning. And whatever had just slipped through her grasp would come back. Because some choices don't vanish in the dark. They return. They demand reckoning. And hers was still waiting. Why was everyone so quiet at the table? The briefing room felt colder than the desert night had. Concrete walls, bare and echoing, a faint flicker from an overhead fluorescent bulb that hummed like a warning. She sat at the far end, hands folded tightly in her lap, the skin around her knuckles pale from the pressure. No one looked at her directly, not yet, but she could feel it. The silence wasn't ordinary. It was heavy, accusatory. The commander finally broke it. "You had him." His voice wasn't raised. That made it worse. She straightened slightly, her throat dry. The lantern went out. Visual was lost. Across from her, her spotter shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His eyes flicked toward her for the briefest second, then away. His silence was louder than words. The commander leaned forward, elbows on the table. His hands clasped loosely, but the tension in his jaw betrayed him. "You're one of the best we have. Precision, control, reliability. That's what you are. That's why you're here." Her chest tightened. She almost wanted to believe him. Almost. "But last night," he continued, his voice measured, "something happened." The words landed like stones. She opened her mouth to respond, but no sound came. Not yet. The commander didn't press further. He didn't need to. He knew silence could extract more than questions ever could. Someone coughed at the back of the room. The medic, a younger man with kind eyes who never spoke unless spoken to. Even his cough sounded nervous. Her spotter finally broke the silence, his voice flat. She hesitated. The words cut sharper than any blade. Hesitated, not failed, not missed, hesitated. The commander's eyes narrowed. "Is that true?" Her pulse thundered in her ears. She could lie. She could deny it, blame the lantern, the angle, the shifting wind. But the truth pressed against her chest like a stone she could no longer carry. She drew in a slow breath. "Yes, I hesitated." The room seemed to shrink around her. Every sound amplified: the scrape of a chair leg, the crackle of the overhead light. She forced herself not to drop her gaze. The commander didn't move, didn't speak. He just studied her, as though peeling back layers she had spent years constructing. And for the first time in her career, she felt exposed. Her spotter muttered something under his breath. She caught only one word: unacceptable. She wanted to snap at him, to remind him of all the nights she'd steadied him, all the times she'd carried more weight than anyone else on the team. But anger wasn't what filled her chest. It was something heavier, something closer to shame. Finally, the commander spoke again. "Do you know what hesitation costs?" She swallowed. "Yes, sir." "No," he said softly, "you don't." The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because part of her knew he was right. She thought of the face she'd seen through her scope, the weathered skin, the tired eyes, human, not a target, not just an objective, a man. And she couldn't explain why that had shaken her so deeply. The commander leaned back, his chair creaking. "You'll stay on mission, but hear me, one more hesitation like that and you're done." Her chest tightened, but she nodded, understood. The meeting dissolved soon after. Chairs scraped, footsteps echoed down the corridor. She remained seated, unmoving, until the room was empty. Only then did she let her hands unclench, her palms red with imprints of her nails. She closed her eyes just for a second, and there it was again, the memory she had tried so hard to bury. Her brother's face. He was younger in the memory, laughing, sitting on the hood of their father's truck beneath a sky full of stars. His voice rang out in her ears. "See that one? That's the hunter's arrow. It always finds its mark." He had believed in things that didn't exist, constellations of his own invention, but she had let him, because wonder was all he had back then. And then one day he was gone, vanished into a war that swallowed young men whole. She never spoke his name aloud. Not here, not in this world of orders and silence. But last night, looking through her scope, she had seen something in that man's face, something that cracked open the memory she'd buried. A resemblance, faint but undeniable. And suddenly, the rifle had trembled. She rose from the chair, her legs heavier than her body. The corridor outside was dim, the air stale. She moved through it silently, each step echoing faintly off the walls. She found herself outside in the compound's courtyard. The sun was rising, bleeding pale gold across the horizon. Soldiers moved quietly around her, some heading to vehicles, others cleaning their weapons. Ordinary motions, ordinary war. She sat on a low wall, watching them. The medic passed by, carrying a box of supplies. He paused, noticing her stillness. "You all right?" he asked, his voice cautious. She managed a faint nod. "Fine." He studied her for a moment longer. His eyes weren't like the commander's, sharp and dissecting. They were softer, human. "You know," he said gently, "fine doesn't mean much out here." She almost smiled, but didn't. Instead, she looked away. "Get some rest, Doc." He nodded, but she could tell he wanted to say more. He didn't. He just moved on, his footsteps fading. She drew in a breath of the desert air, the faint smell of dust and diesel filling her lungs. She tried to steady herself, but the image of that man's face wouldn't leave. Later that evening, they prepared for movement. The mission wasn't over. It never really was. Targets shifted, orders changed, but the war remained constant. She checked her rifle with practiced motions. Bolt, scope, magazine, everything in place. Her hands moved flawlessly, but her chest remained unsettled. Her spotter joined her, his jaw tight. He didn't look at her, not directly. Finally, he muttered, "Don't do that again." She glanced at him. "Do what?" "Hesitate." His voice was low, almost a growl. "Out here, hesitation gets people killed. Maybe not you, maybe me, maybe the guy next to us, but someone, always someone." She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that hesitation wasn't weakness, that sometimes hesitation was the only thing that kept you human. But she didn't. She just loaded her rifle, the metallic click louder than words. That night as they moved out, the desert stretched endlessly before them. The stars returned, cold and distant, watching silently. She adjusted the strap of her rifle, the weight familiar against her shoulder. Her boots pressed into the sand, leaving temporary imprints that the wind would soon erase. And as she walked, one thought echoed in her mind. The choice she made last night wasn't finished. It had only begun. Because the man who vanished into the darkness wasn't just a target. And she would see him again. She was certain of it. Why did the desert feel louder tonight? Every sound seemed sharper, carried by the cold wind sweeping across the dunes. The crunch of boots in the sand, the clink of gear shifting with every step. Even the steady thump of her own heartbeat seemed amplified, echoing inside her helmet like a drum. They moved as a shadow line, silhouettes against a pale horizon, heading toward the compound marked on the maps. Intelligence suggested the target had returned. A second chance. The kind of chance that didn't come often in war. Her spotter trudged beside her, silent. Too silent. The tension between them hung like a wire stretched tight, ready to snap. She could feel it in the way he adjusted his gear more roughly than usual, in the way he avoided even glancing at her. She didn't blame him, not entirely. But she couldn't shake the image of that face, weathered, human, familiar in a way it shouldn't have been. They halted near a ridge, crouching low as the commander's voice came through the headset. 2 hours until 0 hour. Hold position. Observe. She lowered herself onto one knee, rifle steady against her shoulder. The landscape sprawled before her, sand, rock, shadows pooling between jagged ridges, and there faint lights in the distance. The compound. Her breath slowed as she adjusted the scope. The world shrank into glass and crosshairs once again. But instead of focusing on the target area, her eyes drifted upward, toward the sky. The stars stretched endlessly, a million fragments of light scattered across black. She remembered lying under those same stars as a child, her brother beside her, whispering stories about constellations only he could see. The hunter's arrow, the broken crown, the silent watcher. He had seen patterns in chaos. She had believed him. And then war had taken him. She swallowed hard, forcing her eyes back to the compound. The lights flickered. Figures moved in the shadows, too distant to identify. Her spotter finally spoke, his voice low and clipped. You freeze again and we both die. She didn't look at him. I won't. You said that before. Silence heavy, crushing. She wanted to explain, to tell him what she had seen in that man's face, to confess that something deep inside her had cracked the moment she recognized the shadow of her brother in a stranger. But words like that had no place here, not in this world of sand, steel, and silence. So instead she whispered, "Trust me." He didn't answer. The hours crawled by, time marked only by the shifting of shadows and the occasional murmur over the comms. The desert grew colder, the air thin and sharp. Then movement. Figures emerged from the compound, armed, alert, not a patrol, something else. They carried boxes, loaded them into the back of a truck, weapons maybe, or supplies, hard to tell from this distance. Her scope tracked them, every detail magnified. The curve of a rifle barrel, the sway of fabric in the wind. And then him. The man. Her target. He stepped into the lantern light once more. Same tired eyes, same weary shoulders. Her chest tightened. Her spotter whispered urgent, "There, confirm." She didn't respond, not immediately. Her breath caught in her throat, her finger hovering over the trigger. Through the scope she studied him. He moved slower than the others, as though carrying a weight none of them could see. He spoke to one of the men loading the truck, and for a brief second his voice carried on the wind. A language she didn't understand. But the tone was soft, almost gentle. Her rifle trembled again, not from fear, from recognition. Her brother's voice echoed in her memory. "You know why I'd fight, don't you? Not for orders, not for commanders, for people, always for people." Her throat burned. The commander's voice crackled through the comms. "Sniper, confirm target, take the shot." Her finger brushed the trigger. But something inside her resisted. A weight pressed against her chest, screaming at her to wait, to breathe, to see. Her spotter's voice rose tense. "Do it." The man below turned slightly, and for a fleeting second the lantern caught his face fully. Her breath stopped. The resemblance was undeniable now. Not exact, not impossible, but enough. The jawline, the curve of the brow, even the faint scar above the temple, just like the one her brother had from a childhood fall. It couldn't be him, she knew that. Logic screamed it was impossible. Her brother was gone, vanished years ago. And yet, her vision blurred with the threat of tears. Her spotter snapped, furious. "What are you waiting for?" Her rifle trembled harder. She whispered, so faint he almost didn't hear, "He looks like him." The spotter turned sharply, his voice a hiss. "What?" She didn't repeat it, couldn't. The commander's voice cut through again, sharper now. "Do you have the shot?" Her pulse thundered. And then chaos. A distant explosion tore across the horizon. A plume of fire and dust erupted, lighting the night like a sudden sunrise. The ground shook beneath them, sand rippling in waves. The compound below erupted in shouts. Men scrambled, weapons raised, searching the darkness. The target disappeared into the chaos, vanishing once more into shadow. Her spotter cursed violently. "We lost him again." The commander's voice roared in her ear. "Report." She forced her voice steady, though her hands still shook. "Explosion east of the compound. Target unconfirmed. Visual lost." The line went silent for a moment, only static filling her ear. Then, coldly, "Return to base." Her spotter muttered something bitter under his breath, but she couldn't hear it. Her chest ached, her mind spinning. She lowered the rifle slowly, as though it weighed 100 pounds. And deep down, she knew this wasn't coincidence. Twice now, fate had intervened. Twice, the man had slipped away. She rose to her feet, sand crunching beneath her boots. The stars above glittered indifferently, watching her unravel. Her spotter finally turned to her, his voice sharp with anger and something else, fear. "What the hell is going on with you?" She met his gaze, her voice low. "I don't know." But that was a lie. Because part of her did know. The man she had been ordered to kill was no ordinary target. And the choice she would have to make, when the moment came again, would not just be about him. It would be about her. Who she was. Who she wanted to be. And whether she could live with the weight of her own silence. Why did every shadow feel alive tonight? The moon had risen high over the ridge, pale and cold, casting everything in silver and shadow. The desert was no longer just sand and rock. It was a labyrinth of movement and threat. Every whisper of wind, every crack of shifting stones, set her nerves on edge. She crouched behind a boulder, rifle pressed to her shoulder. Her spotter knelt beside her, eyes scanning the compound below through his scope. Sweat prickled at her hairline despite the chill. "Nothing yet," he muttered, voice tight. "Quiet, too quiet." She didn't respond, couldn't. Her mind was replaying last night, the face, the resemblance, the unbearable weight of recognition. The men below moved like ghosts, shadows shifting against dim light. She could hear the faint rattle of crates, the soft murmur of voices. Every detail was amplified, every motion a potential threat. She swallowed hard. Her fingers brushed the rifle's cold metal, remembering the first time she'd held it as a recruit. Hands trembling, heart pounding, the drill sergeant's voice echoing. "Control your weapon, control your fear." She had learned control, yes, precision, steadiness. But tonight, control felt fragile, like ice over a river ready to break. Target in the north wing, her spotter whispered. 2 men with him, weapons high alert. Her pulse quickened. She raised the rifle slowly, careful not to betray her position. The scope framed the movement, precise, mechanical, yet human. Every gesture was deliberate, and yet there was a softness, a hesitation in the man's shoulders. Her chest tightened. She could feel herself straddling 2 worlds. One was duty, order, mission. The other, memory, grief, love, and the impossible idea that her target was somehow connected to her past. "Ready?" her spotter asked. She shook her head slightly. Not ready couldn't be. He didn't press. He never had before, but this time there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Maybe even fear. Maybe even understanding. And then the compound erupted. Not explosions this time, not gunfire. A truck roared through the entrance gate, headlights blinding in the night. Men scattered. Orders shouted in a foreign tongue. Chaos bloomed instantly. Her rifle shook in her hands, though not from fear, from choice. Her spotter cursed beside her. "Do it, we've got movement, you know the drill." Her eyes followed the target. He moved with the men, directing them, pointing, gesturing. Still human, still alive, still someone she might have known. She pressed her lips together, breath shallow. And then a scream, sharp, high-pitched, human. It cut through the night, startling even her hardened companions. A woman, trapped or injured in the chaos, crying out. Her hand froze on the trigger. The command crackled through the headset. "Sniper, take the shot." Her finger hovered. Her spotter's voice rose, urgent, almost panicked. "Do it now." But she couldn't. Because taking the shot would mean ignoring that scream, ignoring that life, ignoring the humanity that her target, whoever he was, carried with him. The desert stretched out endlessly before her, indifferent. The stars above blinked coldly, distant. And in that vastness she realized the truth. This mission wasn't just about orders, not tonight. It was about the choices she made, while the world watched silently. Her eyes caught the man once more. He glanced toward the direction of the scream, hesitated, reached a hand toward the woman, protective, careful, human. Her finger relaxed. Her spotter's voice was sharp, incredulous. "You're going to let him?" "Yes," she interrupted, voice firm, even as her heart thudded violently. "I'm letting him." He stared at her, confusion, rage, fear. "Do you know what you're doing?" "I do," she said. And in that instant the choice was made. She did not pull the trigger. Instead she watched. She watched as he guided the woman away from danger. He carried her across the sand, through fire and shadow, until she was safe behind cover. Then he disappeared again into the chaos, a ghost in a world that demanded only violence. The explosion of the truck in the far courtyard was deafening. The dust and fire rose like a wall. Men scrambled, orders shouted, weapons discharged. The world became a blur of chaos. And still she watched. Her spotter's face was pale, his lips pressed into a thin line. You just let him go. For what?" "For this," she said quietly. "For that scream, for the life he protected, for what little humanity remains." He looked at her like she had lost her mind, but she didn't care, not anymore. The commander's voice cut in over the headset. "Report." Her lips trembled, she forced words out. "Target evaded, no casualties confirmed, awaiting new orders." Silence followed. Her spotter muttered under his breath a curse, but she could feel a shift, subtle yet profound. Something unspoken passed between them. Respect, disbelief, recognition of the choice she had made. She didn't know, she only knew the weight of it. As the dust settled, she lowered her rifle and leaned against the boulder. The stars, cold and indifferent, blinked above. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the tension drain. Memories rose again, the nights under the stars with her brother, the constellations he invented, the stories he whispered to her. "You'll always know the difference between what is easy and what is right." Right, not easy. She whispered it to herself, letting it echo across the desert. The night remained quiet for a long time after that. The compound lay distant and still, its secrets safe for now. The men she had been ordered to kill were gone. The screams she had heard, still ringing in her ears, reminded her that war was not a series of targets. It was people. Fragile, stubborn, impossible people. Her spotter finally spoke again, voice softer, almost hesitant. You're different." She didn't answer, she only nodded. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And tonight she had acted. She packed up slowly, methodical, every movement deliberate. Her eyes swept the horizon one last time before they retreated. The night, the stars, the desert, they watched her, silent witnesses to a choice that would echo beyond the mission, beyond the orders, beyond the war itself. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a whisper of hope. That even in war there could be moments of human truth, moments where action, not obedience, defined who you were. She would carry that choice forward, always. Because the rifle had trembled for a reason. Because the choice she made would be remembered. And because sometimes, the hardest battles weren't fought with bullets, but with the courage to remain human. Why did the silence feel heavier than gunfire? They returned to base under the first light of dawn. Exhausted, tense, the desert behind them now just a stretch of sand and memory. But inside the compound, the air felt thick, oppressive. Her footsteps echoed against the concrete, each one a reminder that choices have consequences. The commander was waiting. He didn't rise as they entered, didn't greet them. Just leaned against the map table, arms crossed, eyes sharp. The team's movement slowed, uncertain. They all knew why. Her spotter fell into step beside her, still quiet. His jaw was tight, lips pressed into a thin line. "You know this isn't over," he said, low, almost a warning. "Do you even understand what you just did?" "I understand," she replied softly. "I made a choice." He exhaled sharply, frustrated. "Choice doesn't matter. You're part of a mission, part of a team. You're not supposed to pick and choose." She looked at him, seeing not just anger but fear. Fear that the world would demand the wrong thing of them again and again. "Sometimes it's the only thing that matters," she whispered. Inside the command center, reports streamed in. Cameras, scouts, intelligence feeds, all tracking the movement of the man she had let go. Everyone else saw him as a target. She saw him as something else. Her hands itched, wanting the rifle again, the control, but she didn't need it, not yet. A medic passed, glancing at her with eyes that seemed to ask a question she couldn't answer. She gave a faint nod. He understood anyway. The commander finally spoke. "Your hesitation has consequences, not just for you, for the entire unit." Her spotter stiffened beside her. "Consequences," he repeated, his voice tight. "She saved a life, maybe more than one." The commander didn't respond. He only stared at her, unreadable. She felt a swell of conflict. Pride, fear, guilt, determination, all tangled inside her like barbed wire. Later, in the quiet of the barracks, she traced the scars on her hands with trembling fingers. They were faint now, faded from years of work, but still reminders of every mission, every loss, every choice. Her mind wandered. Memories of her brother surfaced again, the laughter, the whispered stories, the stars they had once watched together. "You'll always know the difference between what is easy and what is right." She had acted on that memory, on that principle. But the weight was still there, heavy, suffocating. The night brought darkness, and with it more questions. She couldn't sleep. Every shadow in the room seemed alive, echoing with voices from the past and present. The hum of the air conditioning, the faint murmur of soldiers moving in distant corridors, even the steady ticking of a clock, all amplified her awareness. And then she heard a whisper, not in the room but in her mind. "He's not just a target, he's part of your story." Her breath caught. She had felt it before, fleetingly, but now it pressed forward, undeniable. The man she had watched, the man she had let go, He was connected to her in ways she didn't yet understand. Her spotter returned later, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" She nodded slowly, though her chest remained tight. "I will be." He lingered, hesitant, then turned away. She watched his back, thinking about the weight of expectations, the burden of choice, and the quiet strength required to carry both. Morning arrived with a pale, indifferent light. Orders came down for the next phase of the mission. The target had been seen moving north, near a small village on the edge of the desert. Her rifle was ready, packed with care, every movement precise, controlled, but her heart, that remained unsettled. She trained her gaze on the maps, tracing the possible routes. Her spotter leaned close, whispering strategies, contingencies, and safe approaches. He didn't question her hesitation this time. He didn't need to. He had seen the courage it took to defy orders for something greater. The team moved out again. Sand underfoot, wind in their faces, the horizon stretching endlessly. She took her place at the edge of the column, eyes scanning, ears attuned to every sound. Hours passed. Every movement of the team, every shuffle of desert debris, every distant call of wildlife sharpened her awareness. The desert was alive tonight, every shadow a story, every gust of wind a warning. And then at last they saw him. The man. The resemblance was undeniable now. Even from a distance, even under the muted light of dusk, her heart recognized what her mind struggled to accept. He moved carefully, almost deliberately, yet with a gentleness that contrasted starkly with the world around him. A child ran past him, laughing, oblivious to the soldiers watching from the dunes. He smiled briefly, nodding at the child. A fleeting human moment in a war that demanded only violence. Her finger hovered over the trigger, every instinct screaming at her to act. But she hesitated. Because she remembered the scream, the moment she had chosen humanity over orders, and she knew instinctively, irrevocably, that the next choice would matter even more. Her spotter leaned in. "Do it," he whispered, voice strained. She shook her head. "Not yet." The target turned, scanning the area, and for a brief, impossible moment their eyes met. Recognition, a flicker of something unspoken. Her chest tightened. The rifle shook in her hands, but this time it wasn't fear, it was anticipation. She lowered it slowly. Her spotter's breath hitched beside her. "You're insane," he said, barely audible. She didn't answer. Words would fail her. She only watched. The man moved toward the village, careful, protective, unarmed in the face of potential danger. Every step was deliberate. Every gesture spoke of a life lived in shadow, of choices made in defiance of a world that demanded only obedience. And she knew she would follow, not as a soldier following orders, but as someone seeking the truth, seeking connection, seeking resolution. The night stretched on, vast and indifferent, yet alive with possibilities. Stars glittered above, cold, distant, silent witnesses to choices made and paths yet to be taken. Her spotter's hand brushed hers lightly, a tentative gesture of trust, of understanding. She didn't move away. She couldn't. Because the choice she had made, and the one she would make next, were no longer about orders or missions or duty. They were about humanity, about memory, about love and loss and the fragile, stubborn persistence of life itself. The desert wind whispered through the dunes, carrying sand, carrying silence, carrying stories of courage that went unseen. And she followed, heart steady now, mind alert, every sense alive. Because the rifle may have trembled once, twice, maybe more. But the choices she made, the ones that mattered, would echo far longer than any bullet. Sometimes courage isn't loud. It isn't fire and fury. It is quiet, deliberate, resolute. And she would carry that courage forward. Into darkness, into danger, into the unknown. Because some battles aren't fought with weapons. They are fought with the strength to do what is right, even when no one is watching. And the desert, endless and unyielding, would remember. Why did the desert feel like it was watching her? The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the dunes. Every ridge, every stone seemed alive, whispering secrets she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. Her boots pressed into sand that had shifted with the wind, leaving uneven tracks behind her, temporary markers in a world that never paused. Her spotter walked beside her, eyes scanning, rifle ready. Every movement was deliberate, every sound measured. But she sensed his tension, the quiet weight of expectation pressing on both of them. They approached the village cautiously. Smoke curled from chimneys, faint smells of cooking drifting on the warm evening air. Children's laughter echoed softly, oblivious to the soldiers hidden among the dunes. And there he was, the man she had let live twice now, moving through the village, unarmed, gentle, deliberate, human. Every instinct screamed for her to act, for her finger to squeeze the trigger. But she couldn't. Not yet. Because last night, last mission, she had realized something vital. Her choices defined her more than orders ever could. Her heart beat in rhythm with memory and morality, not just commands. Her spotter whispered low, tense, "You know what's coming. You need to decide now." She shook her head. "I know I'm not ready." The desert seemed to hold its breath with her. Shadows lengthened. The target moved, unaware of the soldiers observing him. He stopped by a well, bending to help a child draw water. She swallowed hard, fingers tightening on the rifle's stock. Her chest ached. Rage, fear, grief, and longing tangled together. The commander's voice came through the headset, sharp and impatient. "Sniper, confirm visual, take the shot." She closed her eyes for just a moment, feeling the weight of every mission, every life lost, every brother, every friend. The rifle trembled in her hands, but she steadied it. She had to. Because this choice, the one before her, would define her forever. The target turned suddenly, scanning the village. His eyes flicked toward her, though she couldn't tell if he saw her or not. Recognition flashed, fleeting, impossible, human. Her pulse thundered. Her spotter's voice broke her concentration. "We can't hold much longer. Orders are orders." She shook her head again, whispering, "Not this time." The desert wind shifted, carrying a sound that made her freeze. A vehicle approaching from the far ridge. Armed men, not from the village, moving with lethal intent. Chaos erupted. Children screamed. Women called out. The target dropped the bucket and moved toward cover, shielding the nearest child. Her spotter swore, "We're exposed." She didn't flinch, not from fear, not from pressure. Her mind was clear now. She had a choice: obey orders and eliminate the target, or step into the chaos and protect life where she could. Her finger hovered, the rifle trembling violently. The weight of every decision pressed on her. She remembered her brother, vanished into war, and the lessons he had taught her without ever realizing it. You'll always know the difference between what is easy and what is right. The decision solidified like steel in her chest. She lowered the rifle. Her spotter turned toward her, disbelief and rage flashing across his face. "You're insane. Do you know what you've done?" She didn't answer, she couldn't. Instead, she moved. Into the open, into danger, into the firestorm of confusion below. She ran toward the village, shouting orders to civilians, guiding them to safety, shielding children with her body. Bullets tore into the ground around her, kicking up sand. Chaos erupted and the target followed her lead, moving with deliberate care, protecting those she directed. Time slowed. Every heartbeat was audible, every breath deliberate. She and the target moved together through the village, side by side now, silent agreement passing without words. Her spotter remained behind cover, shouting, unsure, caught between duty and disbelief. The armed men pressed closer. She fired controlled bursts, aiming not for destruction but to create openings, cover, space for life to move. The desert itself seemed to hold its breath. And then it happened. A child fell, tripping over debris. Instinctively, she lunged, catching him mid-fall. The target's eyes met hers for a fraction of a second. Understanding, recognition, a silent acknowledgement of the choices being made. Bullets whizzed past. The desert wind carried shouts, screams, and the distant roar of engines. Every step was precise, deliberate, human. The target reached a small alcove, pulling another child into safety. Their hands brushed fleetingly. She felt it, trust, connection. The fragile bond of two humans recognizing the same truth amidst chaos. Her spotter finally spoke again, voice trembling. You're risking everything for what? She didn't answer, she only moved. Every decision, every motion was deliberate. Courage, not orders, guided her. The armed men were closing. The rifle in her hands felt like an extension of her conscience. She fired, carefully, effectively, but always with the intent to protect, never to kill indiscriminately. The desert night stretched endlessly, indifferent, yet every action she took echoed with purpose. Every life saved, every choice made, was a testament to something greater than orders, greater than obedience. At last the armed men retreated, regrouping on the far ridge. The target and she had guided the civilians to safety, and now the village was still. Quiet, fragile, alive. Her chest heaved. Sweat, sand, and blood streaked across her face. She looked at the target, and this time the recognition was unmistakable. His eyes held questions. Fear, relief, humanity, and something more, a connection she could not yet name but would not ignore. She lowered her rifle completely, letting it rest against her shoulder. She exhaled, long and deliberate, letting the adrenaline and tension drain. Her spotter finally emerged from cover, eyes wide, disbelief etched into every line of his face. You just. I chose, she said simply. He stared at her, words failed him. And in that silence, under the indifferent stars, she realized the truth. The mission was not just about killing or orders. It was about the courage to act with conscience, even when everything demanded otherwise. The target nodded briefly, almost imperceptibly, as if acknowledging that he, too, understood the weight of choice. She watched him move away, back into the shadows, back into the desert that would swallow him once more. And she knew she would see him again. Because some connections cannot be severed by distance, by war, by fear. Because some choices echo far longer than the missions, the orders, the war itself. She turned back toward her spotter, voice low but steady. We follow him next time, carefully, with purpose. He nodded slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. I trust you. For the first time that night, she allowed herself a faint, fleeting sense of hope. The desert wind carried dust across the dunes. The stars glittered coldly above, indifferent and eternal. And she realized that courage, true courage, was not in the rifle, not in obedience, but in the willingness to act with humanity, even when no one else would. Her rifle had trembled twice, maybe more. But she had chosen. And that choice would resonate far beyond this night, far beyond the desert, far beyond the war. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought in silence, in the moments no one else sees. And sometimes, that is exactly where the greatest victories are won. Why did the desert feel smaller now? The night had passed, leaving only dust and memory behind. Dawn spread pale light across the dunes, brushing the world with soft gold, indifferent yet revealing. She sat alone on the edge of a ridge, rifle across her knees, watching shadows retreat with the morning sun. Her spotter approached slowly, voice low. You didn't sleep. I was watching, she replied, eyes fixed on the horizon. The desert doesn't stop, and neither do choices. He sighed, settling beside her. Choices, yeah, I don't know how you do it, make the call when the stakes are this high. She shrugged, though the weight pressed on her like a stone. I don't know either, you just act and hope it's enough. The team was gathering now, assembling quietly for debriefing. They moved like shadows themselves, carrying fatigue and tension in every motion. Orders would come. Reports would be filed. Consequences measured. But she felt the world narrowing, concentrating only on what mattered, the lives she had chosen to protect, and the target she had let live. The commander arrived, expression unreadable. His eyes met hers, sharp, evaluating. Report. She spoke carefully, deliberately. Target evaded. Civilians unharmed. Mission incomplete, but no casualties among non-combatants. Silence followed. He didn't nod, didn't question, only stared, waiting. Finally he said, voice low but firm, "Sometimes the mission is more than orders. Sometimes it's judgment." Her spotter's eyes flicked to hers, incredulous. Judgment, not orders. That was what she had acted on. That was what had guided every trembling decision, every heartbeat stretched between duty and conscience. As they moved back to base, she couldn't shake the memory of the target. He had moved through danger with care, protecting life as though instinct demanded it. And in that movement, in that humanity, she recognized something familiar, something irrevocably personal. Night fell again. She found herself walking the perimeter alone, rifle slung loosely over her shoulder. The wind whispered through the dunes, carrying faint scents of earth and distant fire. And then, a sound. A soft shuffle, careful, deliberate. Her heart clenched. She raised the rifle, steady, trained. The figure emerged slowly from shadow him. Eyes locked. Recognition flickered, cautious, unspoken. He didn't move toward her aggressively, didn't raise a weapon, only studied as though measuring the weight of her choices. "You," she whispered, voice barely audible. "Why?" He shook his head, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I didn't want this to be war, not with you." Her chest tightened. He knew her, somehow, intimately, and she realized the connection she had avoided seeing, the tie that haunted her missions, her conscience, her trembling rifle. Her brother's face rose again, clearer now. Not just memory, but reflection. The resemblance she had seen, the instincts, the way he moved, it was more than coincidence. And suddenly, all the choices, all the hesitation, all the fear and courage made sense. They moved slowly toward each other, careful, wary, but unarmed in a world that demanded otherwise. Words were sparse, none were necessary. Understanding passed between them silently, like a language older than orders, older than war. Her spotter arrived moments later, eyes wide, rifle lowered. I don't even know what to say," he murmured. She didn't answer, she only watched. The commander's voice crackled through the comms. "Sniper, report." Her lips pressed together. Target accounted for. No further action required at this time. He didn't respond. Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It carried weight, recognition, a quiet acknowledgement of the choices that had been made. Later, in the quiet of the compound, she sat alone again. The desert outside glimmered under the moonlight. Sand and shadows shifted, imperceptible yet alive. She traced the lines of her hands, every scar, every tremor, every memory. And she understood. The mission, the orders, the chaos, they had all been tests. Not of skill, not of obedience, but of conscience. She remembered the scream she had heard, the child she had saved, the target she had let live. Every action had consequences, but not all of them were visible, not all of them were immediate. Sometimes courage is quiet, sometimes it is small, sometimes it is choosing life over death, humanity over obedience. The target had vanished again into the night, but now she understood him, the connection, the meaning, and she realized the mission wasn't over. It had transformed, from duty to understanding, from orders to choice. Her spotter returned one final time, voice soft. "You did the right thing." She shook her head slightly. "I did what I had to. Right isn't always the same as easy." He studied her, recognition dawning. "Yeah, I think I understand now." She looked out over the desert, the wind carrying sand and silence, carrying echoes of choices made and lives spared. Somewhere in that vast, indifferent landscape, she found a sense of peace. Fragile, tentative, human. And she knew the rifle had trembled not because she was weak, but because she was alive, because she felt, because she chose to act with conscience when the world demanded compliance. The stars above glittered silently. The desert waited, eternal, and she walked back toward the compound, every step deliberate, carrying with her the weight and clarity of courage. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought in silence, and sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. She reached the barracks and paused, hand on the door. The wind shifted, the desert shifted, and in that moment of quiet she understood what it meant to survive war, to survive choice, to survive herself. Because courage is not always in the fight. Sometimes it's in the decision to remain human. And she would carry that truth forever. Why did the desert feel alive this morning? The first light of dawn spilled across the dunes, painting everything in shades of gold and ochre. The world was quiet, except for the whisper of wind carrying sand across the barren hills. She stood at the edge of the ridge, rifle slung over her shoulder, watching the horizon, the endless desert, the faint glimmers of life that had survived the night. Her spotter joined her silently. He didn't need to speak. He had seen what she had done, what she had risked, and what she had chosen. The weight of her decisions pressed on them both, but now it felt lighter, tempered by clarity. "You did it," he said finally, voice low. She shook her head slightly, almost smiling. "I did what I had to, that's all." The desert stretched endlessly before them, indifferent yet alive, carrying memories of past missions, echoes of orders obeyed, and whispers of lives saved. Somewhere out there, the target she had spared, the man whose face mirrored fragments of her past, moved with the same care, the same humanity, the same weight of choice. She thought of him often, not just the resemblance to her brother, not just the mystery, but the courage he had shown, the way he had protected life when violence would have been easier, the way he had reminded her that even in war, humanity matters. The mission had ended in a way no one had expected. Orders were fulfilled partially, reports filed carefully, consequences acknowledged, but what mattered most wasn't written on any document. It was carried in the choices made, the lives spared, and the conscience intact. Her spotter broke the silence again. "Do you think they'll understand, the higher-ups?" She shrugged, letting the wind sweep across her face. "Some will, some won't, it doesn't matter. What matters is what we did when no one was looking. That's what counts." He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You're different. I think I understand now." She didn't respond. Instead, she looked at the desert, at the faint tracks of those who had survived, at the distant glimmer of the sun reflecting off the sand. Every choice, every hesitation, every act of courage had led here. Her mind wandered to the nights under the stars, the stories her brother had whispered, the constellations they had named together. "You'll always know the difference between what is easy and what is right." She had known it then, in the desert, in the quiet chaos of life and death. And she knew it now, as the sun rose higher, casting warmth across the barren landscape. The team gathered slowly, faces weary, eyes alert. Orders were given, debriefings conducted, but the tension was lighter. A subtle shift had taken place, not through force, not through commands, but through the courage of one soldier to act with humanity. She walked among them, offering brief nods, faint smiles, gestures of acknowledgement. They had witnessed her choices, and some had begun to understand. Others remained bound by rigid orders, unable to see beyond protocol. But she didn't need everyone to understand. She only needed herself to know. Later, as the base quieted, she found herself alone once more, gazing at the distant horizon. The desert seemed endless yet intimate. Every dune, every shadow, every shifting grain of sand told a story. Of life, of survival, of courage, of choice. And she understood that her mission, her trials, her struggles, they were not just about orders or targets. They were about integrity, humanity, and the quiet strength that comes from acting with conscience when no one else would. The rifle rested against the wall of her quarters, silent now. It had trembled, yes, but it had also been a reminder of the weight of choice, of the stakes of life and death, of the responsibility to remain human amidst chaos. She sat quietly, letting the memories flow. Faces of civilians saved, glimpses of the target she had spared, the fleeting connection, the echoes of her brother, all intertwined into a tapestry of courage, sacrifice, and reflection. A soft wind drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of the desert and the faint promise of a new day. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself. The past was heavy, the present demanding, and the future uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, she felt aligned with purpose, grounded in choice, and connected to something greater than orders. Her spotter appeared again, quietly, leaning on the doorway, ready for the next mission. She smiled faintly, shaking her head. Not yet, there's time to reflect first, to remember to be human. He nodded, understanding more than words could convey. And in that silence she felt it, the legacy of her actions. The weight of her choices would ripple far beyond the desert, beyond the mission, beyond the fleeting moments of chaos. They would echo in the lives she had touched, in the courage she had inspired, in the humanity she had preserved. The stars faded, replaced by the brightness of day. Shadows shifted across the dunes. The desert waited, eternal and patient, for the next story, the next choice, the next act of courage. She stood, steady now, heart calm but alert. She knew that the rifle might tremble again someday, that the desert would challenge her, that war would demand decisions that tested every fiber of her being. But she was ready, because she had learned the truth. That courage is quiet, that choices define us, that humanity endures even in the face of impossible odds. And as she walked toward the horizon, toward the unknown, toward the life ahead, she carried with her the certainty that some battles are not fought with weapons. They are fought with conscience. And some victories are not seen, they are felt. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And in the quiet desert, under the indifferent stars and the endless sky, she had acted. The rifle rested, the sand shifted, and the world continued. But she carried the weight, the clarity, and the courage of a choice that would be remembered for generations. And somewhere beyond the dunes, a life continued because of it. And that was enough.